Hello and welcome to the channel. So last week I had the surprisingly difficult job of explaining why I'm currently appreciating colors that are a little bit more muted, more desaturated, and more calm feeling right now. And so this week I am further going to torture myself by explaining why I've been obsessed with toothy, woolly wools, and specifically why I love Bluefaced Leicester wool. Hey there, thank you so much for being here today. My name is Felicia from SweetGeorgia and this is Taking Back Friday. This is a space where we come every Friday and we talk about something to do with either knitting or spinning or weaving or dyeing. Today I want to tell you all about my love for BFL. BFL. What is BFL? So BFL is short for Bluefaced Leicester wool, which is a specific sheep breed. So like if you buy potatoes, you have russet potatoes and you have Yukon Gold potatoes or you have red potatoes, and each type of potato is generally a different size, a different color or texture. And so you get the exact same thing with wool and breed specific wool. So with the Bluefaced Leicester, it comes from this general family of long wools where these sheep originally came from the United Kingdom. And so there's also Leicester long wool, there's Border Leicester, and this one is Bluefaced Leicester. Now, when I look at these pictures of Bluefaced Leicester sheep, I've never seen actual blue faces on them. But I guess the skin itself is a little bit of a blue tint to it. So if you were to ever look really, really closely at these sheep, they probably would have skin that would be a little bit on the darker side, maybe a little bit on the blue tinted side. I've never seen that. So when I started out learning how to knit as a kid, access to yarn for me was generally acrylic yarns. Generally, it was things that, people had left over in their stashes and they passed on to me, and I had the opportunity to work with and try all sorts of different colors, but many of those fibers at the very beginning were acrylic. And then I graduated to yarns like Peyton's Classic Wool, which when you look at the label, it just says 100% wool. And then when I was ready to start buying my own yarn in a real live yarn shop, I was overwhelmed to discover all the beautiful kinds of fiber there were. And there was more than just wool. There was merino wool, which sounded like the epitome of elegance and luxury. Merino is soft and bouncy and light. It was beautiful to knit with. So then when I started learning how to spin my own yarns, I remember one of my initial goals was to be able to spin merino. And so I very quickly sourced some from a local shop and started to try to spin merino. And the spinning shop had originally recommended to me that I start learning with Corriedale wool, because Corriedale was a kind of sheep breed that was a little bit more coarse, a little bit more grippy. It was easier to draft. There was a lot of qualities of the Corriedale wool that made it easier to spin. And so I found that fiber was really, really easy to get going. And I thought, I'll just transfer all of my skills very quickly to spinning merino wool. And I discovered that they are not at all similar. Merino as a wool has a much shorter staple. So the length of the actual fiber is much shorter. And it's very, very crimpy. And because it was so short, I felt like the fiber was going to slip out of my hands at any moment in time. And so I kind of like gripped my fiber with a death grip, just compressed it, just found it very tricky to spin. So then, very early on in my spinning world, I heard that BFL was a good fiber for new spinners to work with. And so I'd heard it called Biffle, and I think Biffle is probably a pet name for it, but I've also heard it called BFL, Bluefaced Leicester, and also Bluefaced Leicester. So to me, BFL is like the perfect wool. And that's probably why we make so much of it here at SweetGeorgia. We have the BFL and silk spinning fiber. We have BFL+Silk as a DK weight yarn, and we also have it as a fingering weight yarn now, the BFL+Silk Fine. So going back to what I was mentioning before about the merino wool and the staple length of that merino wool, when you shear it off of the sheep, it comes and it's probably about this size, this length, the staple length. Whereas when you look at a BFL wool or a Bluefaced Leicester fleece, if that gets sheared off the sheep, the staple length of that wool is quite a bit longer. It might be maybe 4 to 6 inches, something like that. It's a little bit longer, much easier to work with if you're spinning it. The other thing about these two different kinds of sheep breeds is that merino, when you look at the crimp of the fiber up close, you'll see that it's actually, if you like look at it under a microscope or a magnifying glass, you'll see that the fiber itself is kind of like just a giant squiggle. It's like a tiny, tiny little squiggle here. And so that squiggle is what adds the elasticity to the yarn. It's what makes that wool bouncy and springy and gentle and soft, all of that kind of stuff. So there's that aspect of it. With BFL, the crimp of the fiber, so not just the staple length, but the crimp of the fiber, like how the shape of how it goes, is much more of like a soft wave. It's a little bit more of a gentle wave. And so if it doesn't have this sort of behavior or this sort of characteristic to it, and it has more of this kind of characteristic to it, it means that the wool itself, the fiber itself, reflects light a little bit nicer. So it reflects light in a much smoother way, and that's what makes it a little bit more glossy looking. So if you compare two yarns, you compare like a merino yarn, you compare a BFL yarn, the BFL yarn is going to have a little bit of a gloss or shine or luster to it. And so that's one of the things that I absolutely love about BFL, is this little bit of gloss. Now, we were just talking about softness and about how merino is very, very soft. It's generally very soft because it has a very fine micron count. That means that the fibers itself are smaller, thinner, finer. They're just smaller. And so that lends itself to the softness of the feel of that fiber. Bluefaced Leicester is considered a long wool. It's a little bit more coarse than merino. And so it's not going to necessarily have that same micron count. It's not going to be as soft, but from practical use, I feel like BFL, the softness that it is perfectly fine for all the things that you generally want to make with it. Like if you want to make a sweater, or you want to make a shawl that goes on the outside of things, or you make a hat or mitts, those kinds of things, even socks. So we've talked about staple length, we've talked about crimp, and then we've also talked about micron count. Now, what else is it about BFL that I love so much? I think part of the reason that I love it so much is that we combine it with silk to make our fiber, to make our yarn. So like here, we have, this is the BFL and silk as a spinning fiber. So this has got 25% tussa silk blended into it. It's 75% wool. And so this has like a little bit of a sheen already to it. I'm comparing it with other things like Targhee. You can see already the color dyes differently on these two fibers. This one you can see is much more matte in appearance. This is the Targhee. It has a matte, non-shiny appearance, whereas the BFL already, it reflects light, and so in some cases it makes it look a little bit lighter in those areas just because it's a little bit shinier, it's reflecting light. So those are those kinds of fibers. Now, we recently have been looking at making colors for next spring already. Last week we were talking about the colors that we released for fall, but we're already talking about colors for spring next year. And so one of the other characteristics about BFL and silk is that sometimes, or BFL, is that because it's not a superwash yarn here at the studio here, because it hasn't been superwash treated at all, it takes up dye in a slightly different way. So like these are some of the colors that we are experimenting with for spring next year. And so this one is dyed on the Tough Love sock. So this is a superwash merino yarn, super soft, really nice and squishy. This is our everything yarn. We use this for everything. And then with the BFL, you can see that using the same color formula, using the same dyes and the same proportions and everything, the colorway looks very, very different. It doesn't show like the sharpness of the differences between the colors. And so as a result, I feel like this yarn, when you go to knit this into a sweater, it's much more mellow. It's relaxed, it's calm. It's got that same sort of calm vibe because all of the color transitions in here are much more gentle. Whereas you can see like the color transitions in here are quite sharp. So completely different appearances, even though they're the same dye formulas, same weight of fiber, they're both fingering weight. But yeah, this one, it's quite a bit different. I'm gonna show you a project that I just finished because I'm so excited. Finishing projects is very satisfying. Who knew? So this is a hat that I just finished a couple days ago. Very, very excited about this. This hat is called the Tremblant, so this hat is called the Tremblant Toque. Oh, you can see that's my pattern. So this one was designed by Dianna Walla for Espace Tricot. Espace Tricot is a wonderful yarn shop that is in Montreal in Quebec. And so this one, we have interviewed Dianna Walla before for our audio podcast. You can find that one on Spotify and on iTunes. But yeah, I talked with Dianna Walla before about color work, knitting, and all sorts of things like that. And so I really wanted to knit one of her patterns. Her hat patterns are all so cute. And so I finally got a chance to knit the pattern that she made. And it's just really beautiful, simple, easy color work. You just do like about an inch of ribbing. You do the little color work section, very simple color work. And then you just knit a couple of rounds of plain whatever color you're doing here, and then the main color, and then you just decrease. The decreases, I think they happen so quickly. And then I topped it with a pom-pom that I got as a gift a couple of years ago from Dianna at Everly Yarn. So Dianna is our tapestry instructor for the School of Sweet Georgia. She gave me a pom-pom for Christmas one year. This is lovely. So I finally have a place to put it. Really excited about that. This yarn is just feels absolutely perfect for this kind of color work, and it just feels like it holds the stitches really well, holds the color really well. It's just a really good stitch definition, and because it's not superwash, then it gives it the opportunity for all of that yarn to kind of like meld together a little bit when you finish it. So when you wet finish it, the yarn wool has like little barbs on each individual fiber, and so those barbs will kind of like hook together and then form this smooth, complete, contained together fabric. It just kind of enmeshes upon itself. When you use a superwash yarn, it doesn't really do that same kind of thing. It doesn't basically full is the word for it. It doesn't full together. It doesn't become this complete cloth. And so superwash yarns are great for lots of things. If you need really easy care, you need to make baby things, you need to make socks that you want to wash very quickly or very often, all of those kinds of things, superwash is great for those. But if you don't need a superwash yarn, using a woolly non-superwash yarn like this makes for really beautiful, beautiful knitting. And it just makes a fiber and a fabric that just fulls together and feels like one fabric. Like, in fact, I generally am pretty lax about weaving in ends and things like that. And so I did actually weave in all the ends on this hat. But as I was doing it, I was thinking, I don't really need to, because when I wet finished all of this, the yarn's not really going anywhere anymore. It's kind of just in the fabric, and it wasn't really going anywhere, so I could have just trimmed it off and left maybe half an inch, but I was good and I wove in all my ends. And so it's completely finished. The other thing about this particular hat is that I used almost no yarn at all. So it takes 3 colors. So these are the 3 colors that I happen to use. This one is birch, this one is lollipop, and I can't remember what color this was. I think it was one of the dark purples. I think it was like elderberry or something. I can't exactly remember which color this was. Yeah, I should check. But in any case, I weighed all of these little balls of yarn that are left over, and I think I basically used about 20 grams of the main color. I used 2 grams of this pink color, and I used about 9 grams of the purple color. And so I could theoretically make at least 5 more hats from all of this yarn. So yeah, I do have a lot of extra yarn. I do have some other colors at home that I'm making some other hats, maybe some for the kids, things like that. I feel like this would make a beautiful yoke sweater, like a Fair Isle colorwork yoke sweater. This would be great. But I think with these particular leftover balls, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually put it onto the loom. I'm going to use my previous warp and use it as kind of a dummy warp and wind a really quick and easy warp, because I want to see what this yarn looks like when it's all woven up. I'm going to weave some kind of a twill project, and then I don't know if you can tell, but I feel like I've worn this thing on many videos because I'm super attached to this right now. And what I want to actually do is I want to take this yarn, this BFL and silk fingering yarn, figure out a twill pattern that I like and a fabric that I like with a drape that I like, and then I'm going to weave a version of this as well, because this thing is basically just one giant long panel of fabric that gets origamied in a way and sewn together. So that's kind of what I have on my plate right now. Just finishing up some weaving projects and then going to weave a little bit of this. So I hope that I have convinced you that BFL or working with like a woolly wool is a good thing, and not every single thing has to be, you know, next to skin softness or cashmere soft or merino soft. I think that there's a lot of opportunities to work with wools that are toothy and woolly and just feel like really beautiful natural wools and things like that. And there's so many different kinds of sheep breeds to explore. I feel like if you're going to start experimenting with different sheep breeds, BFL is, like, at least it was for me, is like the entry point into a whole other world of all of these other things that you can experience and try and feel. And so we do have a course for spinners. It's called Spinning Sheep Breeds with Rachel Smith, and we just recently concluded this 5-module series with Rachel. And she looks at everything from fine wools and medium wools to long wools like BFL, and also down breeds and Icelandic breeds, double-coated breeds, just so many things to try, so many things to spin, so many things to knit with, and all of the different ways that you can use these sheep wools. So yeah, I would love to hear from you in the comments. Let me know what you think about woolly wools, toothy wools, rustic wools, things that feel more natural, things that feel a little bit like wool. And yeah, this is my absolute new favorite yarn right now. When we made it in the DK weight, I was just waiting for the time that we can make it in a fingering weight so that we can do color work projects like this. Super, super excited about this. So the BFL Silk Fine right now, as well as the BFL Silk DK, is all available in all of the seasonal colors, as well as a select number of our core colors. We wanted to present this yarn in the colors that it looks really, really great in. And so this is some of them. They still look beautiful, vibrant, solid, perfect for color work. So that is it for today. Thank you so much for spending the time with me here today. If you like this episode, please do hit the like button. And if you would like to see more content like this, please do hit subscribe. We come here every Friday and we talk about something to do with color and craft. Thank you guys so much for being here, and I will see you in the next one. All right, bye for now.